episode 51 of two FMA-Nerds talk about stuff. So I brought on Cameron Byrd. He is a Modern Arnis black belt, a U.S. Army veteran, and a published author. We talked about transitioning from the Army and applying that into our civilian life and how messy that can be, but also how that's our experiences from 20 years in the GWAT can benefit us moving forward, especially as leaders and instructors and just general human beings. So the opportunity to become more than just and moving forward. It's a great conversation. Hope you enjoy. Definitely check out his social media links. It's all in the thing down below. And also, thanks for helping support the channel by liking, subscribing, and sharing it out. If you have anybody want to come on as a guest, or if you'd like to come on as a guest, just reach out to me, and I'd love to have a chat with you. But yeah, and again, let's enjoy the episode with Cameron. This is a great one. Enjoy. What's up, Cam?
Hey, brother. How you doing?
Doing really well. I'm glad we finally made this happen after much deliberation. So, yeah.
Yeah, man. I really appreciate the invite. It was unexpected, though. I mean, It's pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, I've always appreciated your approach, and you've been very supportive of my shenanigans and everything I've been doing. So I'm more than happy to share the love. And honestly, this gives me an excuse to get to know you better, homie.
Yeah, man. Looking forward to it. How you want to get started?
Like I said, I'm all about human stories as to getting to know the people behind the sticks. So let's do a biographical. We can go as far back as you want to, like way back in the womb, or as soon as you want. So yeah. But yeah, introduce yourself, and yeah, we'll get this rolling.
Yeah. Okay. So my name is Cameron Byrd. I own AKST, and we could go back. We won't go back too far. I don't know. It's been a while though. Maybe 14 years old. That's when I started training in karate. Started training when I was 14 in Chesterfield, Indiana, with a guy named Gregory Emswiller. He was Shihan Dai to Takayuki Kubota in Gosoku Ryu karate. He actually Tak Kubota still teaches at his school out in LA, California. So everybody knows the Kubotan keychain. That was his name that was lent to that. So that's my lineage there in karate, which, Gosoku Ryu is a karate judo combination, and Shotokan lineage, obviously, with the forms and everything. So hard style. And then, let's see, that school closed down. I was 17 when that happened. So I trained there for a few years and then joined the military a couple of years later, 19. Infantry was in Iraq in 2008. We did convoy security there. Came back. Obviously, it was the end of 2008, and the market had crashed, so nobody was hiring. No full-time jobs, so I worked probably 5 part-time jobs to make ends meet. At that time of my life, had a new wife and a step kid, and my son on the way then. And unfortunately, my plan was to get into law enforcement, and the state of Indiana had put a hiring freeze on all police departments for 5 years. So I was halfway through a criminal justice degree at the time, and I was like, well, this is no big deal. It's what I really want to do. I'll wait it out. And I'd been doing security work for, a couple of years before that, and I've done all kinds of security work. I ended up doing it for about 10 years, all said. So I did armed, I did unarmed, I did a lot of hospital security. I did loss prevention, catching shoplifters. I was fortunate enough to work for companies that had hands-on detainment policies, so I got a lot of experience doing that. And then, yeah, that ended when I was about 29. I was like, I'm done. I'm just tired of wrestling with dirty butts. And, you know, I just realized like, I'm not going to be able to really impact people the way I want to. I'm not going to really be able to help people because that's what I'm all about, actually. So I was like, man, this just isn't it. And I was getting ready to take my last physical test. I'd already done the lie detector and stuff for Indy Metro. My uncle was on the department, and I pulled my application. I was like, I'm done. And so I got into finance after that because I wanted to learn about money. And then a few years later, I got divorced, and I was like, hey, like this is a time to reinvent myself. What am I going to do? So I went to massage therapy school, which is what I do now. I'm in my office now. Started my own business as soon as I graduated, and right after that, I mean, maybe a year after that, I got into the Filipino martial arts and started training with Grandmaster Mike Mathews and Grandmaster Bruce Chu. I know Chris really well. I know you guys are buddies, and yeah, I've just been making my way to camps and seminars and doing all that ever since, and still in the massage business as well. And I started teaching pretty much. I don't even think I'd been training FMA for a year before I actually started teaching it because um, I needed people to train with. Frankly, they just didn't have anybody around. So, in that one of the cool things about at least the way Grandmaster Bruce Chu does things. He hates it when you call him Grandmaster, so I'll just call him Bruce. Yeah, Bruce lets you teach anybody up to your level. So when I started teaching, I think I was like a level 7 or something, and you know. I taught for a year, and then I think I went to like level 5 or whatever, that kind of thing. And I realized, you learn a lot more teaching than you do just training alone. And I didn't think I would like teaching. I did it out of necessity, and turns out I really enjoy it. So I got my black belt last year, and I've got a school that I train at in Lakeland, which is Valor Martial Arts, ran by JD Lewis, and they're a Tong Sudo school, and they do jujitsu there as well, which I appreciate. And yeah, so I've been there. I've been teaching there for about a year. In fact, I think we just crossed the 1 year mark. And now I've got a couple basic instructors under me. I've got an intermediate instructor, and I've got one person that is she's level 4, so she's gearing up for like a black belt test sometime next year and a half, depending on how she does. So yeah, man, that's the background.
That's really cool. It's really interesting. So for one, thank you for your service as another fellow Army veteran. Has
Thank you,
it's one
brother.
to another. Yeah,
Yeah.
uh, it's really interesting that for a lot of martial arts, and I'm just going to say military martial arts, so they're military, profession of arms, some sort of law enforcement. There's a certain point of their life, and they hit this point of enlightenment or existential crisis or whatever you want to call it, that
Hmm.
their body, their brain, their soul is so beat up from doing the hard stuff that they want to transfer from the damage dealing to the healing aspect. So and it ends up
Right.
being like healing their own traumas by helping others and finding somatic healing processes. I mean, we've talked about this a lot offline, and we'll definitely get into it today. But yeah, it's really interesting that I know a lot of martial artists, especially military martial arts, that
Hmm.
go into either physical therapy, they're kinesiologists, they're massage therapists, they're counselors. I
Hmm.
mean, it's really interesting to have that cathartic release by helping others and showing that gratitude by being that person that you can lean on. So yeah,
Yeah.
congratulations for hitting that as well. Because yeah, transition it is the normal path, pretty typical, I should say, of combat arms going to law enforcement or some sort of law enforcement, and then realize like, nah, I don't want to do this because
Right.
And just the same, like a lot of people who run security, because I mean, I did armored security as well, did site security. My guy Cooper, he does site security as well. So like security is in the wheelhouse of a lot of martial arts, especially if they come out of the military. I mean,
Hmm.
because you have a practical experience where we're taught very efficiently how to stand, post, and observe or report. But I mean, there's for elevation and growth. For an individual who wants that fulfillment, I mean, that's good for a time, like you found out, but there's so much more out there than just being a body on the line. So it's interesting.
There's this is something that um, it's interesting that you pointed out, I guess, because it's something that it's a project that I'm getting ready to start,
Mm.
which is a blog, and really the driving idea behind that whole thing is really pretty simple. It's for whatever reason, like when I go through my history, and I think this is probably pretty typical, like you just said, is people say, "Well, I didn't know that you. I thought you were a massage therapist. I didn't know you were in the military, or I thought you were a big military guy. I didn't expect you to hold this particular view, or." I built a cabin in the woods last year, and people were like, "I didn't know you could do that. When did you learn how to do that?" And I didn't know you were into martial arts. I thought you were, this, because everybody wants to like put you in this box in their own mind because it's convenient for them. But um, I've struggled a lot over the years with people saying, well, you were in the military, so you are XYZ and you think this way and you're rigid and you're black and white and you're all of these things. And, in some cases they're right, but in a lot of cases they're not. And I, I guess the driving idea behind that project being like, as a man, you're going to go through seasons of your life and you're supposed to learn from those, and you're not supposed to stay stagnant and rigid. I mean, there's a lot of views I held when I was, in my late teens, early 20s, that I just am like, oh God, that was so wrong. Like, that was so wrong. And I know you've talked about it as well. You're like, oh man, like, I'm not even that guy. I was that guy, but I'm not that guy. And I think it's just sad that people think, well, he was that guy, he'll never change, or Um, he used to believe that, and now I'm uncomfortable with the fact that he doesn't believe that way anymore, because it's really not about you; it's about them. So, just kind of exploring that topic is something that I intend to do in the foreseeable future.
Yeah, we're the phrase that I use for all means of healing and enlightenment and just like finding that better half is you're more than just. Because
Right.
when you put somebody in a box, that limits their growth or potentiality for becoming bigger, better, all these things. And like you said, it's comfortable for other people to put you in this box because for one, they're unwilling to see you in anything else, either because ego, competition, fear, um, and on top of all that, like it's a real reflection on themselves, like you said, that they're uncomfortable with your progress. When
Mhm.
reality is we should be lifting each other up because I mean it's the whole a tide raises all ships. But in this case, like we all build each other up as a team, as a community, and we all get better and better and better by each generation. But that starts with that internal dialogue of saying, hey, what are my deficiencies? Have the bravery and courage to face them, do the work, and
Mhm.
just move forward unapologetically. And yeah, just setting the example, setting the tone by the one who's leading forward and not allowing others to define you as just. So yeah,
Yes.
and I find that with a lot of veterans. I also find that with a lot of people who have come out of trauma. It's just because of our commonality as veterans. This is a thing that speaks widely for people who have been there, done that in regard of like say the GWAT when we were radicalized at 19 because
Right.
I was and with full intention of getting in the fight and get some righteous justice, all the things.
All the
And
things.
and it seemed right at the time. 20 years later, different story. But
Totally. But you gotta. context matters, right? And I
Hmm.
think that when you're talking about, we were a product of the times, and we watched 9/11 happen. You know, kids today, are they're alive, that's just history to them. But we lived that, and it's like the generation before us that watched, Kennedy get assassinated. It was that singularity type event that just set everything else in motion. And I'm not saying that. I'm saying it's helpful when we talk about that time to put it in context, not because it excuses our views or behavior at the time, but because when you're an impressionable, young man or woman, like, you're you're going to experience those emotions, and it's very hard, if you especially when you have adults around you that say they held those beliefs. You're like, hey, I'm right. Like, I'm right to feel this way. I'm right to want to get out there and do this thing, and whatever. And as you age, or whatever, as you get older and have more life experience and get down the path and can see the consequences of what's happened over the last 20 plus years, you realize, like, the only people that are pushing this are people that have never been there, done that. End of story. They're just, if they had, they wouldn't be beating their chests about it. And it's strange to see. It's it's still strange to me to see, grown men in their, 50s, 60s, 70s. They never went to war. They never did anything. They never put their hand up. And they're saying, well, they're the ones that are beating their chests and waving the flag and saying, F these commies and blah, 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 and all this stuff. And it's like, you may hate a person's government, you may hate the way they do business, but at the end of the day, the people in that country are people. And if you don't want to treat them like people, I mean, I really, I really have a low opinion of that. I mean, honestly, it upsets me. Like, it breaks my heart to see people hold that view about other people anywhere in the world. I don't even the enemies of the United States or allied governments, like that. That really bothers me, man. I mean, you can say, screw Iran, but I've met a lot of great Iranian people. You can say screw whatever country, and I guarantee you, I've met and interacted with people from that country, and they're just people. They care about the same things that we do. They care. They just, all they want to do is provide for their families and take care of their loved ones, just like we do. And I'll it reminds me, that line in Black Hawk Down at the very end where he's like, it's just about the man next to you. It really is, and it's really like that for who we consider the enemy as well. Like, they're basically, they're your brothers and you don't even know it.
I mean, the fact is, no matter where, you're somebody's son, you're somebody's brother, you're somebody's father, uncle, etc. What is the brotherhood is bloodshed, warfare. I mean, it is the the currency and the valuation and sense of purpose that men have carried since the dawn of time, since societies have been developed and these warrior societies have been developed, and there's just so
Mhm.
much of this burden to carry that legacy. And you run into this situation when you talk about the people who've never been there, done that. It's like these are the people who are unfulfilled, a lack of purpose, unsatisfied, unblood, and they're resentful because their lack of courage, bravery, fear, all these things, and unwillingness. But again, they end up being that old worn out man who sat on the porch wishing what was and what they could have done and almost done, but they didn't do it. And this is where I find again that unblooded, untested, and unsatisfied man comes about, and they stay in that rigid belief system. And then they also judge others for their lack of growth moving out of that belief system. Because I mean, if you think about it, um, approaching 40, uh, we have the conflicts. Like in my own case, I mean, we had the coup attempt in the Philippines, we had Gulf One, we had Somalia, we had Haiti, we had the drug wars and with the cartels back in the 90s.
Yep.
See what else we had. We had obviously the GWAT for the past 20 years. What else am I missing in there? Of course, we have the pullout of Afghanistan, we have Ukraine, and we have October 7th. So,
And
like, if you
Syria.
and Syria, I mean, we got that's 20 conflicts easily, easily.
If
So,
you
like,
think about it, Kurt, the United States has been at war for over half of our lives.
yeah. And if you
I,
look back at the history, we've been at war since day one. We've had very
yeah.
few instances of peacetime, like 6 months maybe, of
Hmm.
not actively engaged in some sort of conflict somewhere in the world.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And it's interesting. The U.S. was fairly non-interventionist before.
Mm-hmm.
Even before World War I and World War II. The U.S. was an economic power, but we didn't get involved in a lot of other things like we do today.
Oh, we were isolationist. I mean, if you look at history, pre-Roosevelt, FDR, that is, we were
Yeah.
very isolationist, especially coming out of um, uh, the Civil War,
Hmm.
Spanish American War a little bit, but more or less because of the failure of Reconstruction and dealing with all that. The U.S. was very much like hands off. Why do we need to get involved with that? Because one, we don't want to pay for it.
Right. It would be nice to. I'm not, and I'd like to say this first. I'm not an isolationist. I mean, if you take it to its extreme, you end up like Japan, and it's not great. So, but I do see, and I think most people would agree. Like, yes, we live in a fast-paced, connected world, and all those things, but we don't need to get involved in every little skirmish that pops up. It's just one, it's unsustainable. And two, as history has shown, a lot of these conflicts, they just didn't matter. They were built on, false pretenses or ideas that just turned out to be false, but people want to continue to hold on to that. And it's unfortunate. It's
And
unfortunate.
it's deeply tribal, and it's rooted in our epigenetics or DNA, whatever you want to call it, in our culture. And this leads into, like, again, we are the product of our environment and the society that we're raised in and its traditions. And again, in Americas, we're a war fighting society who is constantly in conflict. So the rhetoric that we're brought up with is, you're a warrior, you're a winner, this is all you can be, you're not more than just this is who you are. It's
Right.
very class based, like literally this is your caste, not class, but caste,
Hmm.
and this is all you're going to be. And this is where the importance of growth and enlightenment and going through that like crucible of all of that to find oneself on the other end. And this is, again, like I said, I'm in congratulations of your ability to put the sword down and pick up the massage and pick up the stick. So
Yeah.
yeah,
And
so
you as well, man. I mean, you as well.
yeah, appreciate it. So we dove really heavy. Let's
We're right out the gate.
yeah, fuck
Man,
yeah.
we just boom. We're in over our
Um,
heads already.
Alrighty, so let's tie this back to martial arts. So, like, martial arts is a patrilineal tribal learning system, and it is interesting. Like, we have these little groups, we have these little cliques, we have these little clans of like martial arts, and it's interesting to see where people start from. Because again, you start in a Japanese martial art.
Mhm.
And I'm assuming it's because that's what was available. Because I mean, we're about the same age,
Mhm.
and what was available back in the 90s and the 2000s was a lot of karate, a lot of taekwondo, and not a lot of FMA. At least, I mean,
Right.
there was in small areas, but like in the majority, that's what was available.
That's 100%. I actually started in a taekwondo school, and I was there for 6 months, and I loved martial arts. I knew I wanted to do martial arts, but I didn't want to compete. And um, in taekwondo schools, typically that's what they're geared towards, is competition. But and I trained with a guy that he ended up going on to win tons of taekwondo competitions. I mean, dude was a stud. He was one of my buddies in school. But I decided early on, like, this isn't the route I want to take. It didn't feel real to me, and also I don't. I still don't see a lot of value in in rules based competition, because you end up injured and injured at best and punchy at worst. I mean, like, it's dangerous. Like, and I could just see into the future on that, right? Like, you see great fighters, and just look at them when they're 60. Like, come on. But you see great martial arts masters, and there's lots of examples of this in the Japanese systems. You know, Kubota being one of them. He's in his 80s and he's still teaching. Like, the dude's a beast. And but what I'm getting at is, I wanted something I could do for the rest of my life, and I didn't want to pay the price to do it. It is like physically the physical toll. And you know, I've got spinal arthritis. I'm I'm a totally disabled vet, right? So, like, I I'm there already. If I'd have done this plus competition, I mean, God, what would I have been like? Yeah, I don't know. Would I
You you'd be
would
like
I be
me.
able to get out of bed? I have no clue, right? So,
Yeah, I mean, competition, just like military service, it's such a finite window,
right.
and your expiration date is sooner than others. And I mean, yeah, you got war fighters and you got competitors that go 20 years, but like that's 20 years out of what, 70, maybe 80 years of life.
Yeah,
So, I mean, you have so much more ahead of you, and yeah, like I find people who get into competition later in life, who are injury free but have done other sports, they have that athletic foundation,
right.
but they, like you said, they don't have the brain trauma, they don't have the arthritic body structure, they don't have all those competition related injuries. They may be a
Mhm.
little deficient in some of the kinesthetic programming and stuff like that, but if you're free of the mental and the physical injuries, you have an opportunity to actually catch up, per se,
Yeah,
if you have deliberate training that is more goal based and it has a better approach to learning,
right.
rather than just like monkey see, monkey do, follow along, tell you how to do it.
Yeah. And I don't know. I'm thankful that I didn't go that way. By the way, not knocking competition or anything like that. I mean, it's got its place. But the thing that appealed to me about Filipino martial arts specifically, and the way that Bruce teaches it, Grandmaster Chu, for those who may have just joined or whatever, but I like the Remy Presas approach to FMA and Modern Arnis, because it includes the force continuum options. And for people that this is really important, because I think a lot of people miss the boat on this. Traditional FMA and other styles, and I've worked with people of all types of FMA styles, and they all I like and appreciate all of them. Um, but when you focus on the stick, particularly in the mindset that the stick represents a blade, it's easy to miss the boat on empty hand application, and it's easy to think, well, the stick or the blade is the fight. And yeah, if you have a bladed weapon, it is the fight. No argument. No argument with that. But the chances of a blade on blade encounter are even smaller than the chances of a blade on empty hand encounter. Um, so I love the fact that you start with a weapon on day one. I love the fact that you're learning how to use a weapon, because you're doing that on day one. Anything you pick up is now a weapon, right? A lot of Filipino martial arts, like, you don't let go of that thing, but it's cool if I let it go, because the way that we train it translates, like, all the trapping, all of the most of the stick trapping you can do it empty hand. Most of the you know everything else pretty much translates to empty hand. Now, I've seen people say, well, double Sinwali doesn't translate to empty hand. Directly, no. But the fact that you are training both hands to move independently of each other, if you don't think that has value, then you've never fought southpaw if you're a righty. You know what I mean? So it's just it's stuff like that. Interestingly, a lot of people that I train and have extensively trained in FMA, they're holding the stick in their lead hand, which means that if you're a righty, you're now fighting southpaw and you don't even know it.
That's what I do.
Right. And I've been doing that since I was a teenager because I found out quick. Like I was 14 years old when I started and sparring with full grown men. Well, there was no weight classes, none of that stuff. It's just you do it. And I found out that if I switched to southpaw, well, that threw them off immediately. Or if I switched in the middle of a session, boom, okay, now I've got something going on here. I can actually, get some hits in. And when you're a kid, that's a big deal. So, but I think there's immense value in FMA from those perspectives, or particularly in modern Arnis. So
Yeah,
I don't want to speak for the entire, spectrum, right?
I mean, in our FMA, as the phrase would go, but yes, underneath the guideline of what one understands and making it their own. And what I find it interesting for FMAers and trying to find, or just people in general with martial arts and trying to find
Mhm.
applications to any concept, is one, they're based in principles because it's been tested, proven, and repeatable.
Mhm.
Uh, enough that you can find some commonalities, such as like we're limited to the physical capabilities of the human frame. We don't have tails, we don't have horns, our arms don't articulate a certain way, so we can only do X amount of things. Was said that, so that's a principle. The concepts though of like how do we get this to there and do this with that, I mean, that leads up to like interpretation of creativity and physical capability.
Mhm.
And then the last part of it is what's the goal in mind? And this is the part again about the higher processes of learning is when you have a problem set and what's the goal, and you try to find that path that's uniquely yours within certain
Right.
set of rules.
Right.
It ends up being deeply yours, and it creates more of an opportunity to like have better sets of uh learning and benchmarks for you that
Mhm.
you can put in the context of like, oh, I see that, I've seen this before, I've done this before, I kind of get it. Because
Exactly.
when you have the baseline instruction of like, I'm going to tell you how to do this, this is the standard, do it this way without question, that's a very basic level of understanding and learning. I mean, it's like how we were
Right.
taught in the military of like, you will do it this way because I told you to do it this way. And there was no question of like, why. But and then you
Right.
lead into like the instructional phase as a teacher, where you're actually presenting concepts, presenting ways to figure out how to do this, but you're not giving the answers. It's that medium ground of like transferring knowledge, so a student can figure it out on their own eventually. And this is where I find like a coach is really important, because a
Yes.
coach is there along with you in the lab and critiquing it and modifying specifically to your needs and your capabilities. But that coach needs to have the breadth of experience to say, hey, here's the concepts that we're applying, here's the principles, here's the goals, here's the rules that we're operating in, but we're going to figure this stuff out together for you.
Right. Right.
And yeah, it's that whole, you have to have the eyes to see, but that comes from experience. So yeah.
You know, exactly spot on with the coaching. And when you talk about the experience and you strip away all the noise, okay? And basically everyone you've brought on your podcast has talked about um, how does FMA fit into the world of martial arts today, particularly in the world of the UFC and other things, right? Um, strikers strike, grapplers grapple, wrestlers wrestle. You that you're always everyone's got their own game, right? Um, what what I think people would appreciate from learning from modern Arnis in particular is it's Arnis is all about the flow, your ability to transition from one thing to the next seamlessly. Like you and FMA is what it's all about, right? So um, that means two things. The first thing it means is you tend to be a little more offensive, and you tend to get the other guy to play your game so that you're not playing his game. Um, I have a buddy that's on the sheriff's department. He's on the SWAT team, and we train together. Like we lift together. We train a little bit of martial arts, but in general, he's just like, "Don't touch me," and I'm like, "Okay, no problem." Um, because you know his skill set is specific to detaining people, and as much as people like to disagree with this, law enforcement is actually trained to detain people without permanently damaging them, and that is extremely difficult to do, and I've done it a lot myself, and we'll talk about that later. But I know that he wants to put his hands on me. So I'll just get down like I'm going to grapple him, and then I'll stick my thumb in his eye. And he's like, whoa, like nobody does that. Right. So I say that because he's extremely skilled at what he's doing. I mean, the dude's a stud, right? Like in reality, do I want to fight with this guy? No, I don't. But he doesn't want to fight with me either. Right. So, and a quick note on that, there's that old martial arts saying, when two tigers fight, one is wounded, the other dies. And in general, I think it's important to keep that in mind because our goal is, like you said, to make each other better, sharpen each other, make each other hard to kill. It's not about the ego. What people they don't get. I don't care how good you are, but if I got 10 guys, I'm gonna get you. I'm gonna get you. If I get you, I'm gonna get you after you ate a big meal, made love to your wife, and you're laying in bed at, you know, 12:45 a.m. I'll get you somehow. You're not invincible, dude. Like this ego driven crap, man. It's just crap. Like the fighter that challenges Navy SEALs and calls them pussies and stuff. It's like if they wanted you, bro, you'd get got. You would get got because that's their game. Yeah, you're gonna beat them at your game. Duh. Come on. Take the ego out of this. It's ridiculous. But um, yeah, so that's one big philosophical, like you said, framework. But the other one is, and talking about teaching students, and back to that coaching point. I'm sorry, I don't want to, you know, but the back to this idea of modern Arnis and where it fits into like a force continuum type framework, which is where I think most people should be living. Like, if you're in a hard style, you're thinking about this is a life or death situation, and as soon as you close that fist, your options are limited. The other person is going to go to the hospital, or they're going to go to the morgue. I mean, it's not. Those are your options. A lot of them maybe have a smattering of joint locks and controls, but are they practicing them? No, they're not. You're more likely to have an altercation with a teenager that wants to, you know, or you're gonna have your drunk uncle at a party that he doesn't deserve to be put on the ground in the worst possible way. You know what I mean? So being able to joint lock, control, detain, especially in today's environment where everybody has a camera, where everybody like, come on, I mean it's extremely vital, and people don't practice those skills. Everybody thinks worst case scenario when it comes to fighting, but the odds are not in your favor on being in that type of situation. And obviously, good martial artists that are in striking arts know that. I mean, I'm not knocking, I'm not knocking it. I train it, yeah. But we have to look beyond this ego-driven type. I can kick your ass kind of bullshit, because that's all it is. It's like, no, I'm trying to be an asset to the community too. I'm trying to be I'm trying to deal fairly and equitably with people, and if I can do so in a safe manner, even when they don't necessarily deserve it, I need to do that. And that's how, I mean, law enforcement operates under that principle all the time. That person's not even guilty in the United States. They're innocent. Do you have to treat them like that?
Yeah, I mean, it's going back to the whole experience part where the buzzword, of course, is situational awareness. But what does that really mean?
Right.
Situational awareness, there's the doctrine, there's lip service to it, but reality is situational awareness is the ability to
Hmm.
recognize danger, see to recognize threat, see to recognize a bad situation, and where you see that applied in martial arts, specifically with competition. Boxers are phenomenal. Combat sports athletes are great at this because it's particular to their game, but they are used to picking up on the physical cues of what they and pattern recognition of
Hmm.
they can see an attack coming in, and this is where it's so important. And I agree with Guru Turu Belton Lubis about this. Is like holding pads actually is you learn how to box better by learning how to pads. You have to be such a higher level
Hmm.
of your athlete to hold pads because you're able to see, not anticipate, but you can see. You only anticipate because you recognize the patterns, but
Hmm.
you're able to see and read what that athlete is going to do. So you can intuitively engage before them and read the responses and do what you need to do. But that comes with experience,
Hmm.
just like everything else, and also putting in the context of what am I doing, what's the end state, and what's the purpose of all this. So in the case of dealing with the worst case scenario that's typical of the self-defense personal protection industry is this issue about one, the lie that we need to come to like understanding is that the enemy and the universe have far more of a say in a combat situation than you do
Hmm.
because you're the lawful law-abiding citizen, so you're not ambushing people, you're not taking
Right.
the opportunities, you're just going about your day. Again, the enemy in the universe, that's the predatory aspect. The universe, that's the chaotic aspect of it. But
Hmm.
if you're just Joe Schmo, just trying to have a good day down the street, you're not looking at how do I ambush this guy because I want to rob them, because hopefully you're not a criminal.
Hmm. Yeah.
And so going to like, and again, from our military training is the locus of control, taking control of the battle space, positive fight space management is engaging when we want to, when, where, and what, and with whom, etc.
Hmm.
And that puts us in that footing of we see the end state of what we're trying to accomplish, but we're taking the initiative. That can be applied in part as a civilian trying to look at self-defense and personal protection, but we're not being predators going
Right.
after potential targets. So we're constantly in a reactionary phase if it's hands-on, but where it's preparatory is all that work ahead of time to be able to see and recognize and to avoid situations where physical altercations may occur. And this is where I've stated a lot of times that if I'm going hands-on, and especially if I'm going hands-on with FMA, I'm already
Hmm.
wrong, and things have incredibly gone beyond my it's gone beyond what I want
100%.
to do. So, uh,
Yeah.
so with that, again, the mindset and putting it into like what is the actual reasons why we train and looking beyond just like, hey, I'm just doing this because I want to go immediately to the kill. Like, nah, that's not what we should be teaching. It's not what we should be training.
Well, a lot of, well, okay, unpopular opinion, but we'll get to that, my unpopular opinion in just a sec. But what you're saying is you win every fight you're not in, right? And that's something that I try to stress, because it doesn't even matter if you're right. Like, we have a human condition where we feel like we have to set the record straight, and there's a time and a place to set the record straight. Typically, the time and a place does not need to include violence. And the truth of the matter is, I don't want to put myself in a position where I set the record straight, and then I can't excuse me, I can't use my left arm the rest of my life or something, because you don't know. But back to that thing, when tigers fight, one is wounded, the other dies. Like want to I don't want to put myself in a position unnecessarily where I have to take someone's life and put my own at risk, because you don't know. Just like you said, the universe may not cooperate. Yeah, I don't typically these days kick above the waist because I don't know what I'm going to be standing on. And can I still kick high? Yes. I don't like to though. I don't want to. You know. Um, I've been in. I got in a fight one day doing hospital security. They had called security, but I didn't get the call. So when I walked around the corner doing my little patrol route, doctor says he's in there. Go get him. I'm like, I don't know. So he came out swinging, and I hip tossed him. I neck tossed him actually, and he weighed about 350 pounds, and I ended up underneath him. But when I got out from underneath him and went to go control his arm um, to put the handcuffs on him, my boots were slipping on the floor because it was freshly waxed and I had brand new boots. Like, you don't know when it's going to happen. And when it does happen, it's not going to be ideal ever. So I think that's a really good point for you to say. But we'll get to my unpopular opinion in a minute. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, yeah. What's interesting again, uh, being a predator. Let's face it, having the absolute control of the battle space. We'll look at the difference with our experiences. Is you have the poor Joe Schmo soldier who's out there with a minesweeper sweeping for IEDs, and the world is just happening to him, and he
Right.
has to react to that, and so he is not in control. So the
Yeah.
likelihood of trauma that comes along with that, because that existential fear of like the unknown, there's
Hmm.
several there's a lot of documented cases where the higher levels of PTS comes as a result of that, because they
Yes.
just don't know the
Just don't know.
anticipation and all that, so they lose that locus of control. They completely lost it because they're reacting to something, and typically it's so catastrophic. So, and just in the same with ambushing people from a criminal aspect with violent criminality, is the people who are the victims of this, they are reacting to that because the violent criminal is predatory. They've
Right.
already scoped you out. They already know that you're an easy, they're engaging with you because they view you as an easy target, and they're going to win because they're taking the initiative and they have control of the space and they're willing to commit. The
Right.
same when one is attacking a target, going on the assault,
Hmm.
from in a military standpoint, is you come to bear with all the assets, all the toys, all the tools, all the intelligence, all the things, and you engage when and where and what and with whom,
Hmm.
and you're in charge. You are dictating the tempo, and you have absolute control, or not absolute, but you have the locus of control. But that is that aspect of, in the framework of this individual, where it doesn't translate to civilian usage, is predatory. It's
Right.
a intentional predatory that's accepted, but as a civilian, like, that doesn't translate very well. Like, the
Right.
awareness of it is important to put in the mind frame of like accepting that like the universe and the enemy is just going to is going to have the upper hand. So I have to be up on my capability to see and recognize and just be aware, and also be humble enough and not to have the ego of like trying to push out and puff up and look for fights, because
Right.
they'll find me. So
Yeah. I mean, I have spoken with a couple guys in special forces, and they asked me, what I did in Iraq, and I'm like, I did convoy security, and they're like, it was unfathomable to them. They're like, that's the worst job because you can't dictate variables. Period. I mean, there were certain things that we could control, and we did certainly. Um, but I was part of the scout element, so we would push ahead of the rest of the convoy and look for IEDs. That was
route
my job.
reconnaissance, let's
That's
go.
what's yeah, yeah. That was my job. So when you are in those types of environments, you got to be sharp, and you never. It's like you said, you never can shake. This is back to the post traumatic stress conversation. You never your body can't shake, your physiology can't shake having to go into the unknown every single day and just do the thing. And I didn't think about it when I was there. I didn't care whether I lived or died. I really didn't. But when I came back is when, the chickens come home to roost, as you know. So, but those are really good points. Those are really good points.
Yeah, and this is where I find the importance for martial arts, and specifically because FMA, and in particular because we deal with weapons,
Hmm.
and we tend to play with the offensive side of weapons, and tend to educate people and romanticize it in some cases, some people. But this
Right.
emphasis of going to a tool, and a tool is immediately is lethality,
Hmm.
no matter what it is. If
Pretty
you go
much.
to,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a lethal force engagement. So
Hmm.
the risk that we run into is, as instructors and as practitioners, is like, we don't need to go to that immediate high level of violence every time. And this is where the importance of like putting in the perspective of like
Hmm.
what could be the worst case scenario based upon the experiences of ourselves or instructors. And this is what keeps us in that more peaceful mindset of I could do this. I have the option, but I'm choosing not to do it because I recognized in myself the situation and the other person of what could be. That's that whole precognitive,
Yes.
um, prescient type thing. Like, I've seen this before. I don't want to do that, so I'm
Right.
not going to do it.
Yeah. And, I don't know if I'm the only. I don't know if I'm the only FMA guy that doesn't carry a knife, but I'm one of the few. I just don't. I have I? Yeah. Am I opposed to it? No. Do I sometimes? Sure, but not that often. I don't. That
I mean,
that's just me.
I
It's
carry a
just me.
knife. I have two roles with it. One, I carry a knife that's a tool.
Yeah.
I have carried a version of this knife for 20 years because I
Hmm.
like it, but I can't tell you how many boxes that I have killed with this thing.
Yeah, I
It is
killed a lot of boxes.
exactly, but
Right.
it's a tool. I mean, I could do stuff with this if I really wanted, but I could also do it with a pointy stick or a marker or whatever. But
Right.
I'm not intending to fight with this. I'm intending to cut stuff.
Right.
But if I am going to carry a fighting knife, I'm already carrying kit and caboodle. That means that I'm already choosing to be at that level of force. So,
Right. Right.
and those situations are few and far between. So, like, am I going to strap up in full Batman belt every day? Yeah,
Right.
not really.
Right. It's just the appropriateness for the situation and what you're likely to face any given day. Um, you know, I think you've talked about. I know you've talked about this, where a lot of videos where you're just practicing a draw and stab or a draw and cut. And I know you've done those videos and you're exploring with the motions, and I think that's awesome. Um, but the idea of you being in of a person, not you, but a person being in a situation where that would be even remotely an appropriate response, like the odds of that are almost zero.
Yep.
They're never zero,
No,
but
but
think about it. They're 99.3% that'll never happen to you.
I have 40-year-old me here in my little dinky ass town of 5,000 people at the end of the road in Homer, Alaska. The likelihood of me having to
Right.
do the dynamic covert knife draw, dict,
Right.
very unlikely. Just in the same,
Dicks.
the likelihood of me doing the covert appendix carry draw of my firearm, very unlikely. Do I
Right.
train it? Sure. My
Yeah.
reasons why are mine, but I'm not intending to do that
Yeah.
because I'm looking for a fight.
Well, and if you're gonna carry, you should do those. I mean, I've carried a lot in my lifetime, and I practiced my draw, dry fired. I've killed a lot of TV screens. No, I'm kidding. I like to dry fire at the TV though because you have targets. Um, but it's important to train those tools within the context of where it's appropriate, and there, if you're going to carry it, you should. A lot of people don't, but you should, and you should practice those knife draws if you carry all the time. You should.
I
I,
mean,
I'm not against that in any way.
the way I look
Totally
at it
for it.
is if I want to defend against it, if I want to recognize what the real risk of the situation being is, I'm going to train it offensively because I need to understand what I'm getting into. I have a principle that I have been taught and continue to teach. It's a family principle of, if I can touch you, I can cut you, and I can kill you.
That's right.
However, you can do the same thing to me. So this is requisite of me to train the offensive aspect, to understand not just the physical draw strokes and the mechanical aspect, but I have to also train the mentality. And this is where the criminal creativity comes into play of, put yourself in the mindset devoid of the morality, but what is the intention of a predator trying to do predatory, violent things? How would I set up this situation so I can do this, so I can win? And again, back to locus of control, positive fight space management, the initiative, those principles there. And so from a instructional standpoint, by training those things to understand that situation, it puts me in the context of, I can teach it and explain it to my students of, like, this is what you're potentially looking at as a potential risk. I'm not saying it's an actual threat all the time, but it may happen. Just like I may kick you in the shins. That's why we train it. I might do a cross collar choke because it might happen. So because you train it offensively to understand it. And this is where I find for like law enforcement, because I have done, and I train with a lot of law enforcement at our local jiu-jitsu gym, and sharing some stuff with them. It's like, it's really eye-opening for them because they don't have the experience of this, because they've never come across it. And it's really, and I find it by showing them the offensive stuff, like, this could be here. So let's adjust the mind frame. The hardest part that I run into is in this idea of criminal creativity, of, because they are a sworn protector. They have a badge and a gun and an oath that they have to fulfill of, like, carry out the law, and trying to put them in the mindset of a criminal of how to do this from a predatory standpoint. That is the hardest barrier that I have with them to understand these concepts, especially when we're dealing with the offensive knife stuff.
Correct. And that barrier crosses over. I mean, when I first started teaching over in Lakeland at Valor, I feel like there's a huge disconnect between me and my students, because it's a private Christian school as well. So they've never had anybody come in and talk to them the way that I was talking to them. And I came across as very aggressive to them and all the things, right? And I talked to my buddy JD, and I've talked with several of the students privately since, and I'm like, hey, I want you guys to understand that these concepts are in many cases extremely violent, right? And you need to understand, like you said, that criminal mind aspect. You would never think of this. It's my job to introduce it to you so you do. And like you said, we do train, like, exactly, we do train things offensively in order to understand them, because we wouldn't do that to someone else, right? Unless the situation called for it. But we just in general wouldn't do that. So helping them understand the disconnect between, like, this is like your insular world that you are familiar with, and what we're talking about is its opposite, its extreme end. But there are many ways to victimize a person, and they don't all include violence. They typically include treachery, deceit, lies, manipulation, and most of the time, skilled criminals are getting you to give them stuff for free. They don't even have to. They don't have to do anything to you. But back to, like, the covert knife draw, I think that's a perfect example. The way that you train it and the way you talk about it is a perfect example of how you should look at that. And I bring it up because I know that there are people out there teaching it directly, as in, like, this is the way, and it's like, nah, bro, like, you got to be cautious. So, but that the words that have come up in the past, since we started our discussion, that controlling the battle space, right? That's something that Bruce Chu is huge on, and he stripped out he stripped out a lot of Remy Presso's system was already like simplified in many ways compared to other arts. Like we don't do a lot of say limb destruction stuff that you see. Do we do it? Yeah, but is it as emphasized? No. Bruce has taken a lot of these, just he's really just distilled it down to basic principles, and he applied them directly to law enforcement because he used to do it, and he teaches that way to military and law enforcement personnel. And this idea of controlling the battle space and dictating the opponent's next move is what I love about Modern Arnis and the way that we practice it. Because, for example, I know in a we'll just go stick, one stick versus one stick. If I throw a forehand strike with my right hand and you block it, you can only really counter from one side. I'm dictating your move, and if you don't do FMA, you don't even know that, right? If I put a hand up like this towards the side of your face, instinctively you're going to reach out and touch it. My goal is to get you to touch it. If you don't touch it, I hit you. If you do touch it, I got you. So that's what I love about just the ability to flow from one technique to the next, and really exercise the art in a way that allows you to deal, like you said, at an appropriate level of force in the force continuum. If they're at a 3, I should probably be at a 4. I should not be at an 8. um, and what I've found in doing this in real life is you need to be able to emotionally regulate yourself along that force continuum as well. And what I mean by that, I'll give you an example. I went out to stop a shoplifter one day and chased him out, and he was about 8 or 9 steps from me, and he reached around like this and he put his hand in his pocket. That's bad, especially at that distance. It's real bad. And he said to me, he said, "Take one more step and I'll mace you. I'll spray you." And I said, "Do it." And he hesitated just long enough, and I went and grabbed him because I knew he didn't have it, right? And I went, took him down. I had him cuffed in about 3 seconds, took him in the office. I put him up against the wall. I'm not being nice, right? And he goes, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, bro, why are you being so mean?" I said, "I don't know what you got. You just said you were going to spray me." "I don't have it. I don't have it." I said, "Okay." So I finished searching him. I set him down. And I was like, "We're cool now, right?" And he goes, "Yeah, we cool, we cool." I said, "Okay." So I was immediately able to take it from, okay, this level of force down to, okay, now we're just having 2 guys having a conversation because you're detained and I'm safe. Um, that's really hard to do. And that's hard to do if you're not getting constant exposure to situations where your heart rate's jacked, your nerves are going, you got so much adrenaline pumping that you can't even feel your hands. That's hard to do.
You need pressure. You need consistent pressure. You need to keep grinding away at the axe, and also you need to keep swinging that axe.
Yeah, 1000%. And then you get to the point which isn't really necessarily good from maybe a human physiology standpoint, but they've tested this. This has been studied. If you are regularly in high stress situations, you no longer get the super high elevated heart rate. Your blood pressure doesn't spike. Your mind isn't going 1,000 different directions at once. Actually, the opposite happens. Your blood pressure drops. Your heart rate normalizes. Your focus goes from this to this, and you just do it. And it's cool that our bodies can do that. But it's also, that's the level of, when you're operating at that level, that's when trauma happens, because those are real life situations. So there's the trade-off for that ability, which is really a human superpower. You're trading chunks of your mental health at that point. And I don't think people realize that.
I mean, it's the risk reward of what's the goal here, because at from a mental health standpoint, at the end of all those traumatic experiences, one becomes resilient, confident, capable, and they have a beautiful tapestry of what makes up them. That makes them very unique and interesting. But it came at a lot of pain,
Hmm.
and being able to process through that to get to that enlightened state, that took some work. Now, just the same from a physiological standpoint, as a martial artist, as an athlete, as a warrior, etc., people who go do dangerous things and physically difficult stuff, again, to build confidence, capability, resiliency, one must go through difficult things where the risk of injury is high, or intentional injury is part of the game. It's part of the
Yeah.
deal. Go get punched in the face to understand that your face is not a blocking surface. We go get strangled on a regular basis, so we understand how not to get strangled. And the result of that, you're going to get dinged up. But you
Yeah.
also have the breadth of experience and language to understand that, oh, I've been here, done that before. This isn't so bad. This is an ouchie. I'm actually hurt. I'm afraid of this because because something may happen. I'm
Right.
apprehensive. Like, you have this whole understanding of like the different things of categorizing of what is actually a problem here, what is going to actually lead to long-term problems, or is just I'm uncomfortable and I can push through. But that it
Yeah.
requires you to go get punched in the face, go do heavy stuff, go do the things, but it makes you resilient, capable, and confident in the end of all that.
Yeah. Yeah. My wife and I talk about this in reference to our raising our kids is we want them to be traumatized just enough. She's my wife. I love her to death. I mean, she's been through hell in her life, and a lot of that was in the army as well. And we want our kids to live their life and get into a little bit of trouble and get, burn their hand on the stove sometimes. But we also don't want them to have to go through all of the things that we went through to get this same experience. It's just like you need that controlled, we'll call it controlled trauma. I don't know the best way to say it, but you want them to be traumatized just enough to stay away. Like, you want them to learn not the hard way, but like just enough to say, I shouldn't do that.
Yeah, I mean, kids need to fall out of trees. A child needs to get punched in the face at least once. Needs to get in a schoolyard fight and figure it out afterwards. But that does
Mhm.
not mean a kid needs to be homeless. A kid needs to be abused. A kid
Right.
doesn't need to get their ass beat down by a group. So, like, there's a spectrum here. So,
Exactly. And honestly, most of the hard edged opinions in martial arts and in life, even politics, is they don't understand that these things do happen on a spectrum. When it comes to violence, that's why we have a force continuum. That's why law enforcement departments are trained in force continuum. That's why soldiers have ROE. And we just, not s- maybe not you and I, but I think there's a big chunk of people who consider themselves fighters, and some martial artists, that they completely disregard this idea that there's anything other than a life or death altercation.
my primary, aside from seeing and recognizing stuff, my primary two tools are, one, like presentation. I can either present myself as big scary brown man with the hardcore accent and could do all the things, or I could present myself as the unassuming, kind of jovial, funny, whatever, and
Yeah.
that disarms. And I find my sarcasm is the primary thing to disarm. The humor
Hmm.
disarms people, because for one, if I want to switch the dial, I can.
Hmm.
But it is the perception of, are you a threat, or am I presenting myself as a threat?
Yes.
And those are skills that people need to learn. And I don't know. And like you're saying, there is, it's a switch, not a dial for some martial artists.
Right.
And they don't understand that, like, you can dial it up because their mindset isn't there. And it comes from, like, they haven't been there, done that. Now, I'm not going to fault them for having lived a comfortable, privileged life of safety and security. That's cool. But
Yeah.
if they're going to be playing in the sandbox of violence, they should have like that introspective moments of understanding what's the why here and actually listening to the people who've been there, done that, those mentors, those coaches, so they can learn from their experiences, but not actually have to be traumatized by going through said experiences.
Yes, yes. And to your point about like that switch versus the dial, you know, um, and controlling variables. If you see me doing this, I'm taking notes, so I try to stay on
Yeah,
track as best I
yeah.
can. Um, the switch versus dial, and then I want to talk real quick about what you said about presentation because that's super important. Um, I have, as long as I am not already put into a fighter, like a survival type mindset, my dial's pretty solid. I've worked on that immensely. But flipping the switch happens when I'm put into that survival mode, that fight or flight, because of the PTS. Like it happens. It happens, and there are times when it happens, and there is no actual existential threat happening. And we can talk about that more in a minute, but I think it's extremely important for people to work on that switch and that dial and include that in your in your teaching process. So I mean, it's something that I try to do, and it's kudos to you for doing the same. The other presentation, when I was growing up and when I was early in my doing security and security management and stuff, when I was a teenager, I was gangly and thin and weak, until I started working out, training martial arts, and then I was just gangly and thin. But I was skilled and I was no longer like weak. But I didn't look like I knew anything. So I had to ratchet up my presentation, especially when I moved into adulthood and getting into the security world, because now I'm in a uniform and I carry a gun, but I'm thin. So, I banged the weights, I force fed myself, and I got up to, my current weight, which is somewhere between 200 and 210 these days. And I'm 6'5" now versus when I was 14, I was, 5'7". So, now like my daughter likes to say that I have resting murder face. And I was like, no, I don't. And then I would see pictures of myself and I'm like, oh, I don't look friendly at all, and I'm like the nicest guy, of course I think I'm the nicest guy. You don't look nice. But back to what you said about presentation, people who say you should not be concerned with your looks, people who say you should not be concerned with how you're perceived. You shouldn't give a shit what anybody else thinks and blah, blah, blah. That's not true. I had a platoon sergeant that hated. I hated this guy. And he used to say perception is reality. And because he said it, I thought it was a bullshit cop out. But what I realized is, no, it's actually quite true. And you need to use that knowledge in a way that helps you. If I'm going into a business setting, I like to dress just a little bit nicer than everyone else in the room. If I'm going to a martial arts seminar, I need to, and FMA, uniforms are hit and miss. I need to dress appropriately for that event. If I'm going out to my kids' choir concert or band thing, I need to dress in a way that is suitable to that situation. There's like when I travel overseas or I travel outside the country, I don't wear hats like this. I don't wear camo. I don't wear colors like this. Um, because I want to blend into those environments. I don't want to stick out. I don't want people to say, "Oh, that guy's an American." When I go to Mexico, I wear blue jeans. I don't typically even wear shorts. because a lot of times, unless they're on Cozumel or along the coast, Mexicans they're not wearing shorts. They're wearing blue jeans. So you need to be culturally sensitive and appropriate. You need to be situationally sensitive and appropriate. And in situations where it's important for you to, put forward that air of authority, you need to dress and comport yourself in a way that that demonstrates it. And then situations where you don't want or need that attention, you need to dress and present yourself in a way that doesn't. And that just goes back to the situational awareness. So I'm really glad you brought up that point.
It's key to, I mean, for everybody's survival, but in my own experience, talk about this, it's been key to my survival as to how I present myself, both in language and in dress. Because again, resting murder face, in my case, it's the angry brown man. I mean, that was my nickname, my identifier, my call sign for decades. So and now it's turning to the mighty brown man because of an enlightenment aspect and trying to move on beyond that moniker. But the fact is, like, the scary brown man is there, and it's typically there all the time based upon how I present myself, etc., etc. It's not sometimes it's intentional, sometimes it just happens, and I have to work on that. But
that's just the resting. That's the resting brown man. It's okay.
That's the neutral. That's neutral.
That's neutral.
But the things that I find, and it's necessary because being brown in this country, and especially the way things have been as of lately, and also just my experience of where I've lived and mostly white places, like a lot of my fights were because I was brown. So this is where that presentation of, for one, code switching is an absolute necessity to, and especially in the military, because I had to code switch to a language that everybody understood, right? Because we've all had that one Sergeant or Joe who talks in a funny accent that you can't clearly communicate intent, purpose, mission, etc., or they're just obnoxious. So everybody adopts a neutral tone so we can have clear, concise instructions, orders, etc. And because communication is key. But as a result of that, you code switch, and so. But when I'm around certain other people, like when I get around a lot of brown, or especially like when I'm in Hawaii or a lot of my cousins, like the brown comes out. The switch goes back to that other presentation. But the problem that runs into is like when it's not appropriate and it just comes out, just like the resting angry brown man face, like when it doesn't come out, that is a problem for myself, and everybody has to deal with it. And this is the case for a lot of martial artists, especially within our field of FMA, where we're dealing with stabby, pokey, murder stuff, is that presentation of how we're looking like. Because you can, I mean, being security and the way we were trained is like, that guy's got a gun. It's that the look and see what kind of game of like, we're going to see who's got a gun in the crowd, and how to read and watch and present themselves and all those things. So as martial artists, especially like I said in our field, we have to be cognizant of like what we're presenting and what we're profiling out there, and like we're making it look like we got this big ass knife shoved down our pants. Like having to be so aware of that in our presentation it's crucial, because again, perception is reality, and this is where like in the animal kingdom, again, if it looks dangerous, it probably is. It's either got venom, it's got teeth, etc.
Right. The same thing when you go to court, and that's why I talk to things there. Just because of my physical stature, I cannot and would not get away with things that my teenage daughter would get away with. It's just so there's a, like it or not, there's that responsibility. There's that responsibility. I like what you're talking about with that, just switching. A lot of people think this is some of this is kind of the root of issues too, is like people think that you are going to be the version, back to what we were talking about earlier, you're going to be this version of that they think you should be all the time. And the truth is, it's not possible. If I'm working in an inner city school, I will behave differently because it's a different environment. has nothing to do with the color of people's skin, but what it does have to do with is what's appropriate for the culture, you know. Um, and when you start talking about, race, things get sticky really quick, especially the way things have been politically. Um, and people think, well, Cam, you're just a white guy. You've never dealt with racism. Well, that's not true. It's just, I mean, I've literally been hands on with people, people of color, and I've had people stop and say, "You leave that black boy alone." Well, I'm sorry, but he stole from my establishment. This is my job. I would have preferred it been a white kid. I promise you, I would have preferred it because I don't want trouble like this. But here we are, and I'm doing my job, and you need to stay in your lane because I'm not going to purposely victimize someone or target someone because of the color of their skin. Um, so, and I've been called all kinds of names, all kinds of racial slurs because of what I had to do for my job. It's like, but I don't take it personally, and it's really hard not to take things personally. It's easier for, I think it is, to be just full disclosure, I think it is easier for me as a white guy that's not strongly connected to my ancestry and my heritage. I honestly don't even know. I don't. I'm a mutt at this point. So
Which is
all all
completely
of the
side trail. That's really sad. And I'll come back to that as the
yeah.
reasons why that's really sad.
Well, yeah, it is, and it's. I know that I would feel differently if someone was targeting me for my race, because I do believe people should be proud of their heritage. I don't think that's wrong at all. So, um, and when you, and kind of like you talk about in your own journey, when you're trying to connect with your roots and your heritage and you're not exactly sure where you fit, that causes a lot of internal issues, and it causes a lot of, like, if you don't know where you've been, it's sometimes hard to know where you're going and know your place and where you fit, and if there's no rituals that are involved in that, and that there's reasons that those things are culturally important because they're individually important. um so I guess all that to say that, um if we could just open up our understanding, uh, like we were talking about before, is just people are people everywhere you go, you know. I feel like we kind of got off track. I'm not exactly
No, it's
sure.
fine because this is the way my podcast goes, and this is why I like it. Everybody gets to join in this wonderful meandering journey of us just bullshitting. So, and this is more for me. Everybody gets to watch it. So, yeah. Anyway, so like a couple of things or three things in there. I mean, we're different men every day to different people. We just
Yeah,
are.
yeah,
It is literally impossible because the relationships that we have with each person is unique and special to you and that person.
right,
So
right.
that just happens. People
And
need to
it's not
understand.
wrong. It's
No,
not
it's not.
wrong. And in fact, I think that we should value that in other
Mhm.
people. Like, I value that you teach the way that you teach. I value the way that the content that you put out, the way you present it. And I know that it's unique to you and your perspective. And I'm glad that you have those different perspectives. I'm glad that you've had those different experiences, even the not so positive ones. And I would hope that people would recognize that in me. And it's because I hope that people would recognize in me that even the negative things, even the not so honorable things that I've done, even the really terrible opinions I've held in the past, um, I do hope that people will see that those shaped who I am today, and understand that even when I held those opinions, my intentions were good. But the road to hell is paved with good intentions. But anyway, you were only on number one of three, so I
Oh yeah.
apologize.
So I mean, this will be four with it, but yeah, to grow is to experience. And my obligatory Dune quote is: "Stagnation is death and leads to total obliteration." People need to understand that in this
Yes.
totality because we cannot be the same as what we were, because if we were, we failed. We failed our whole purpose here as whatever we are in this point of existence, at this level of existence, whole other thing. Anyway, so like presentation, from the self-defense, personal protection standpoint, the way we present ourselves as fathers, for one, we need to present ourselves as physically capable of violence and willing to do violence. If we want to convert ourselves as protectors, we need to look the part and act the part and actually flip the switch when necessary. Just in the case of the military, if that looked like a soft target, we're probably going to go after it. If we look like a soft target because we've lowered our aggressive posture, guess what? The shit's going to come to us.
Right.
So again, maintaining the battle space is based upon taking the initiative of, I'm taking the initiative to look like a hard target, to look like I am an asset, not a liability. You know, in the case of our children, that is absolutely necessary and the responsibility as we have as protectors. And now that's just men. I mean, it's as parents, that's our job to protect
100%. And that's been well studied. You know, terrorists go for soft targets. And so do criminals. Period. They're not going. The likelihood of victimization goes way down if you're presenting yourself appropriately. We had a route that we traveled all the time in Iraq. As an example, we would find IEDs on this route. Most of them were not intended for us. Most of them were intended for 3rd ACR because they got their asses handed to them on that route. And the route eventually went black and we couldn't drive down it anymore. That was our bread and butter route. We used it all the time. So I would like to think that it was because of the way we comported ourselves while we were traveling through. And also didn't hurt that we found like a 500-pounder one day and we blew it up on the village side of the road. Does it like, don't do this again? But, you know, that posture means so much. Anyway, sorry, continue.
Yeah, number 3 of all this, talking about like presentation and cultural heritage and pride of it, or I find it really sad because a big part of this podcast that from the research standpoint for my degree is this issue about preservation, living, and creating new culture as way for Filipinos or other indigenous peoples who've been colonized and conquered, trying to reconnect to those pre-colonial indigenous institutions and belief systems. So as a result of it, cultural pride is a big part of it. That revitalization of culture is a big part of it. And it's okay for us to do that. But why it's not okay for those who were the colonizers, white people in America, why is it not okay for them to do it? Because I find that really sad for the lack of American culture. I mean, American culture is its own culture, but it's disconnected from its ethnic culture prior to immigration. Because I look at my own family. So my family's mixed. And so I'm first generation Filipino. I immigrated as I was adopted. So like I am 100% of the land and the people, disconnected because etc. But for the case of my wife and her family, they've been Americans since the 1860s. And they immigrated from Germany with that 3rd major migration of Germans to the Americas, and they helped settle out the West.
Right.
And so they've been 5 generations removed from what it is to be German. So I look at the aspect of this exuberance and excitement that I have for my own children of, hey, we're Filipino, but you're also German. But they don't have like...
But you're also American.
You're also American. But the thing I look at and trying to be respectful of, if they want to pursue that German side of them, that Caucasian side of them, I have to be aware of that. I have to be respectful of that. And I have to embrace it and encourage it, which I do. But I find it sad in a lot of ways that they can't, or Caucasians can't in this country, because the perception of it being hyper nationalistic, racist, and all those other things. So I really wonder how people navigate that in this space that we are today, and if there is any answers to do so.
I can tell you my answer, and because it's maybe too simplistic, but my answer is this: I literally just take what I like, as far as I take it, what kind of person do I want to be, and then cultures that embrace those principles, I just try to live with those principles. So for example, if you shake hands with somebody from from certain parts of the Middle East, you shake their hand, you put your hand over your heart. I love that. I love that. I don't do that in every situation, obviously, but I value that principle. You know what I mean? Um, so I guess really what I like to do is view other cultures through their principles and say, do these align with mine? And the truth of the matter is, most of the time they do, because they're human principles. And then you can choose the methods that come out of those principles to assimilate into how you just conduct yourself in the world. That's what I do.
Are you saying make it your own? To
That's
tie it back
exactly
to Modern Arnis.
that's exactly what I'm saying. You just make
Yeah.
it your own, because people value where you're coming from, your intention.
Mm-hmm.
I think that you may not agree with somebody's method, but you may 100% agree with their intention. I think that if most of the time, unless you're dealing with even if you're dealing with overt racism, I've found that if you can get that person to talk to you, you probably have more in common with that person than you would maybe even like to admit, because their intention is maybe even pure, but their method was just completely, it misses the mark. You know what I mean?
Yeah, to break down the barriers of prejudice and resentments and fear, one must educate themselves, and that comes often by having time to share a story, get to know the person. Like telling stories is how we break down those walls, but we have to have the presence of mind, courage, humility, and willingness to take the risk of we're going to sit here and process through the story and not be hijacked by that fear emotional response and just let's just sit here and talk about it. Because again, some of the most deeply human things you find is finding out this is your enemy, but actually come to find out, guess what? They were a son to somebody. They loved their dog. They did this, that, and the other. I mean, there's a great example. I mean, it's a terrible example, but it's a great example that was a popular video of the human respect between warriors. So Ukraine war, there was that very awful video of the Ukrainian and the Russian soldier getting in a real-time knife fight in combat. And you saw them figure this shit out on the fly. And they were doing all the things of the good, the bad, but it was a legit knife fight. And there was a point, if you watch the video all the way through, because it's a long, awful video, but there's a point where they both kind of just give up, because they're at that point of they cannot go any further because they're dying. And at one point, if you read the translations, the Ukrainian soldier is just kill me. And the Russian soldiers giving him some honor and respect for the valor of that situation. And so he does. And then you find out in another video, the interview of this Russian soldier of he felt bad. He was just trying to do his job. He fought for his country, his beliefs. He was a brother in arms. He gave respect to this person. I mean, again, human. It's a very deeply human experience that they're shared together, but you still find that respect for the enemy at the other side, because you can, if you're in that presence of mind to do so and willing to do so.
Right.
So
yeah,
yeah.
Those are so hard they're just hard to watch. And I mean, I think that's what we talked about at the very, very beginning of this podcast, is just having that respect for human life, respect for the fact that, if you're fighting, if you're on opposite sides in a war, you're both fighting for the same thing. It's just a different country. Yeah. And most of the time it's your leaders that have the issue. It's not you guys.
I mean, your brothers in arms, just of a different flag.
It's it. That's it. That's it. It's all about the man next to you, right? Because that's all he's doing. a lot of times, you think you want to kick indoors and shoot people in the face. I mean, that's what it starts out as, but then it becomes, well, that wasn't necessary. It was never necessary.
And this is where I find, and this it's been brought up in other podcasts because there's a million veteran podcasts out there. Go figure, with 20 fucking years of war. But
Right.
there's a lot of trauma being processed and a lot of great work being done as a result of it, like the change in the culture, the acceptance of it, and all these things that have occurred for us to have the space to talk about this. Because I know with my father's generation, definitely my grandfather's generation, and most certainly my great grandfather's generation, they could not do this, but we required for their blood, their sacrifice on those bodies to get to the point where we are here today. But my point with all this is, what I find very common is those who have dealt with a lot of violence, who have extreme levels of violent capability, experience, and just involvement can be, if they're not a sociopath, to have incredible capability of empathy.
Mm-hmm.
They have such a love for human life, and they have such a reverence for it, because they know by their own hand and experience that human life is so easy to extinguish. As resilient as we are in potentiality, it is so easy to snuff out that bit of brightness in the universe. And so taking that accountability and responsibility of making sure that we don't go to that switch, have the dial, part of that process is the empathy of, yeah, I could do that, but at what cost? And that is, I find, a basis of morality that is often missed in the quick 1.5 minute video of doing the stabby without context.
Right. Yeah, the context matters. So there, I think you had a fourth point. I think we only got three.
Oh, no, I did the fourth point. I did the fourth.
Okay.
Yeah, because I rolled in with the fourth and into the third.
Okay,
So,
all right. I just
yeah.
wanted to make sure, because yeah, it's important. I think it's important for people to hear this side of not just martial arts, but violence in general, because I take a lot of issue with, well, we talked about this a little bit. I don't post more videos in Modern Arnis strictly because I just don't want to deal with comments from people that are ignorant, that don't know. It's not their fault, but it's hard for me not to take it personally, because I've been there, and it's just like, you just don't know what you're talking about. You don't know. Um, People think that the UFC is real. The UFC has a lot of reality behind it, but the UFC also has rules. And anytime you introduce rules to a game, rules to a training environment, you confine yourself within the framework of those rules. And back to what I love about Modern Arnis is all of these drills, that, because basically Modern Arnis is just a system of drills designed to teach you fighting attributes, and then you color in between the lines. Okay, so like, that's what I love about it. That's why it's versatile and adaptable, and you can truly make it your own. Those are the things that I love. Um, but somehow Modern Arnis is not confined to the rules of those drills, and which I think is what really makes it special. Um, I was doing some jujitsu about 6 weeks ago. I was rolling with a guy, and um, he was in my guard, and he had his hands like this. I grabbed his fingers and I finger locked him, and the first thing he said was, "No fingers, no fingers." And then I was just like, well, are these rules I'm willing to submit myself to in a training environment? Because it's really hard to train groundwork without trying to strike. It's really hard to train striking and then ignore grappling. It's really hard to train. A lot of like defensive knife tactics that you see are grappling based. Not wrong, not wrong. Um, but when you look at what happens is if there's a weapon, there's this thing called weapon focus that we know very well. We forget the fact that if I control that hand, I can wail on him with my elbow or my other hand. I should be maybe thinking about attacking the computer while this is controlled and not just focused on controlling the weapon. Now, two hand control, 2-on-1, great stuff. I'm not knocking any of that. I'm just saying that um, depending on what you're training, um, again, that situational awareness, your tactics need to be fluid. And you need to be aware of what rules you're submitting yourself to while you're training, because it can also create blind spots and training scars in self-defense situations. So you do have to be very cognizant of that.
Yeah, what I find is establishing the rules and protocol ahead of time of who I'm rolling with and what's the expectations of what may happen. So, like in the case of Cooper, with Cooper, I mean, everything goes. I'm probably carrying a knife. I'm probably carrying a training firearm, and I'm definitely going to hit you. So drill accordingly. Now that's when he and I are working.
Well,
Now,
that's also where you do a great job of setting that framework and context, and you talk about that in your videos and in your posts.
yeah, and that's on purpose because I've noticed with others that I don't want to be them in the regard of like, hey, look, I'm being flashy and killing things, but what's the context behind here? It's incriminating. So from a learning aspect, that is my intention is either to inspire, entertain, or educate, and hopefully I can hit all three with that.
Mm-hmm.
But with that, with Cooper and I, there's an expectation that we're probably going to do everything in there, and he's okay with it because that's the pre-established protocol that we have with us as training partners. Now, when we're on the mat with the rest of the students in the club, like depending upon who I'm rolling with, there is that maybe I have a rubber knife, maybe I have a rubber gun, maybe I'll hit you a little bit, but you have to be really aware of who you're training with and build that trust. So the rules adapt based upon the context. But expectations in the gym is like, if I put my hands on you, I'm probably going to throw at you. Everybody knows that. So, and those are things that they've seen enough that they expect that. But there's also the protocol of like, I don't have to land you on your head with a suplex every time, but it's there and it's available. So, and I find with a lot of FMAers when they don't pressure test or spar, whatever you want to call it, put that aliveness into their drilling, because unless we're actually doing it with full intention of violence, it's all drills. It's a switch. That's not a switch. It's a dial, not a switch.
Right.
And this is the critique with a lot of FMA is there's no aliveness in the drills. You're doing choreography. How does that directly play into like combat application? It's just like, well, what's the context and how do we make this alive? How are we variable? How do we make it varied and intensity, purpose, presentation, all these things to give it an actual read and feed and response, so we actually have something to work on and not just blindly going through this pattern.
Right.
So, and again, the critique of FMA is they got to make that more alive. And I know there's a lot of clubs and practitioners and students out there that do. And I find it, again, these people, they come either from a profession of arms background, so combatives is a big deal, or they come from a combat sports background. But for like pure FMAers, without putting that aliveness, there's a deficiency. What I also find, though, with the freedom of FMA is I've used the analogy that FMA is like the duct tape of martial arts. You can just stick it where you want and make it work.
Yes, because you're drilling those attributes.
Yeah.
So I think what people outside perception of FMA is, yes, you're seeing this choreographed thing. But what we can't demonstrate, for example, the way that I like to teach is this: two stick, one stick, one stick versus empty hand versus empty hand. or knife versus empty hand, right? So I'm teaching the exact same drill. I'm just teaching it across 3 or 4 different presentations, but the moves are the same. So you're constantly making that connection from the stick to the empty hand, and constantly making that weapon connection as well. Plus, you're getting a ton of repetitions, right? So you're getting the training aspect. But a lot of people think just because it's a stick drill, they think, you're just watching a video of a stick drill. Oh, well, there is no direct application, no fighting attribute because they can't see it. It's not their responsibility to see it. It's also the student. We're also talking about a learning process. So the student is blindly following at first, but then I take that student that now knows this drill and I have them teach it to someone else. And then that's really the unlock. When they teach that to someone else and they see, oh, this is why we do it, and then they articulate that out loud to this person, like, if I'm breaking in with the stick like this with a sweep stroke entry, that's really a jab. I mean, dirty boxing is all over this. It's the same stuff. It's the same stuff. Um, for example, you know, uh, a number one strike or a forehand strike, right? It could be a blade, it could be a knife, it could be a baseball bat, it could be a bottle or whatever. It doesn't matter what that is. You know how to deal with that. Do you know hand pass? You know how to parry and strike. Those fighting attributes are there. So when you take it from two stick all the way to empty hand, they can solidly make that connection philosophically. I know why I'm doing this, but it's hard to communicate that in a 30 to 90-second video. And then the other there was something else you said that sparked something. And what was the second part of that?
Like context of like, okay, so I was talking about pressure testing with FMA, going
Oh,
from a switch.
dynamics.
Yeah, dynamics. Make it aliveness. Make it
Right.
live. Yeah.
Right. So the other piece that people miss is you're just watching this video and you think, oh, that would never work. Well, you're not seeing the dynamic version. You're seeing the introductory version because we want you to be interested in FMA. It's not, if we're not selling you, we're not doing a 3-hour course on the philosophy, the principles, the blah, blah. This is just so you can see like what a training day looks like. So people miss that context as well. And there is a time for some freestyle, some sparring, some mutual agreement, and a lot of, and we do that. We do that. But what the flip side of that coin is, if you just have two guys going at it, it always turns into kids at Christmas with the wrapping paper tubes. Okay. And that's why I don't, culturally, I very much appreciate those types of competitions and demonstrations. I love that. Um, I don't like, I don't put my students in training scenarios like that because the assumption is you already know how to hit somebody with a stick. You're 4 years old, you pick up a stick and you start hitting trees with it. You know how to do it. I don't need to train that instinct into you. I need to train control, technique. I need to train the philosophies and things behind it. Um, so I kind of look at. Um, I'm going to draw a quick diagram.
While you're doing that,
Yeah.
where I see that is the complicated soft skills. One could say those are tactics. Doing the physical stuff, that's easy. Doing push-ups, sit-ups, go run this thing, go attack that, go punch this, go do the physical stuff. It's all based on physical capability. But the soft
Yeah.
skills, the tactics, that requires some higher level thinking, adaptability, creativity, some critical thinking, and then it requires you not to be just go assault that hill. Don't
Right.
just go hit that thing.
The sparring gives you the ability to think through things, try things, learn, adapt on the fly. And it's critical to see how other people react to the same technique, because you'll notice that pretty much when you boil anything down, it's like three to five basic principles. There's really going to be only 3 to 5 basic responses to any attack. That's just the way it goes. So it has value, um, when it's in the, again, always in the appropriate context. I just, that's where I think it's difficult. I watched one of your podcasts, and you guys were talking about FMA competitions or throwing a weapon in with, with rounds and sparring. Like, that's a cool idea. I'm not against that. Do I would I do it? Well, no, because I told you already. I never wanted to compete. Do I think it would be cool to see? Sure. But again, what's your objective? What's your objective?
Twofold. One, it's fun. That's the basis of all things at this point in my
That's
life.
why we do it at all, right?
Exactly. And
Yeah.
two, it helps me answer the question of what if, and it leads to more questions of what if, because I
Yeah.
don't expect to have the absolute answer. Because if I have the absolute answer, then the learning process is over. And what next? So,
Right.
and
Right.
that's why I equate a lot of the stuff like the knife grappling is it's a puzzle that don't have the corner pieces for quite yet, because there's so many different variables. There's so much that changes every time I do it. So
And that's
the
why these are lifetime arts.
yeah,
You know, that's the beauty of it. I mean, that's why we train. Unfortunately, there's just too much focus on the things that separate us and not the things that we do, or the
because
things that we have in common.
because of money. It always boils down to money, and I get
Money,
that.
money and ego. Money and
Yeah,
ego.
yeah.
So let me share this. Let me share this drawing with you here, and I want your feedback on it. Actually,
Okay, I'll put it.
unfortunately, I didn't have time to make this really pretty. Okay, you see like my bell curve here.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so this is when we start training. Everything on this side is ugly,
Yep.
and it's ineffective.
Yep.
It doesn't work.
Yep.
The training environment is really here. It's pretty and it's effective.
Mm-hmm.
This is, think seminar demonstrations,
Yeah.
right?
Choreography.
Hanging arm drill,
Yep.
stuff like that.
Yep.
Choreography. Over here, this is where martial artists live in reality. It
Mm-hmm.
looks ugly. It looks ugly because fighting is ugly,
Yep.
but it's effective.
Yep.
That's my framework. At least
Yeah.
that's my most recent framework anyway.
I like the idea. Ugly can also be chaotic. But chaos is ugly, although there is a bit of like trying to find the controlling aspect of chaos.
Well, and
Uh,
that's exactly what I mean by ugly is
yeah.
chaotic.
Yeah.
Because if I don't care, you could have two skilled martial artists and they do everything crisp and perfect and they look great on the floor, but if they were to fight each other, it's ugly and chaotic. It's not pretty. It's a brawl, man.
I mean, if
It's
you
a
look at
brawl.
it, so UFC, there's some great technique in there, but you have the other person trying to do the same damn thing to you. So there's a lot of that crisp technique in the pad work that was great in the highlight videos, but you may not see that as
Right.
clean in the cage or in the ring, etc., or on the mat. But you can see like the core principles of what they're trying to do and like the basic idea of what they've been working on.
Right.
Sure. Just in the same, like when you're room clearing, like when we're doing the basic procedure of how to clear the room, like it's clean, it's coordinated, it's pretty. Then you add some chaos into it and some adrenaline, or actually people trying to shoot back at you. Like, guess what? You're falling over shit. Try not
Yeah.
to, but like it's chaotic.
You're
So,
slipping in blood puddles and you're slipping on gravel,
but you're
Like,
effective because you've done all that and you've gotten the experience of it.
right.
So,
How different would the UFC look if it was in a gravel parking lot?
oh yeah,
How
oh
much
yeah,
would tactics change? How much would tactics change if it was on a hardwood or let's say a freshly waxed floor? Or what would it look like on a hardwood gym floor? What would it look like in a living room with
Oh,
furniture?
I mean, environment matters. Like in my case, like going back to kicking, for one, I have a fucked up leg thanks to 4 surgeries and 20 years of dealing with said 4 surgeries plus army. So, and I also live in Alaska where I'm wearing rubber boots most of the year. It's
Mhm.
rainy, it's snowy. So, like, I'm not kicking anything. At anything, I'm probably trying to have a really nice solid base. This is where
Mhm.
my Shotokan comes into play. Like having a
Yeah.
solid stance is really nice because I don't want to slip, fall, and die. But
Mhm.
environment matters. Or walk on the beach wearing flip flops. Like there's certain things I'm just not going to do because I'm wearing flip flops.
Yep.
So, and again, the context of the environment matters. But having the effectiveness of trying to adapt whatever I'm trying to do to that environment, again, that comes from experience, having done the things enough beforehand to be able to adapt as necessary. And this is where I find when people have a single source or a single point of practice and context, they end up being deficient to like, well, nothing else will work, or they're stuck because they don't have that adaptability. And this goes back to this issue about like people who don't know what they're looking at and they have this frame of reference of that won't work in the streets. It's like, well, it might. You just
Right.
don't know enough, or you just don't know what you're looking at.
Well, and I think the the other piece of that is you see videos where, Joe Thug meets Taekwondo black belt and they execute a perfect high kick to the head and it's just a single kick knockout. That would be something that people would say, well, that wouldn't work in the streets. But
It clearly did.
but it did.
Yeah.
But it did. Because the person was decisive in their action. And usually when you look at videos, it's the person who is most decisive in their action.
Oh, speed of
Speed, surprise, and violence of action, baby.
there
That's
we
it.
are. There we
And
are.
Bruce talks about that a lot. Control the battle space, speed, surprise, and violence of action. Um, he always would say, like, Remy Presas would say, block check counter, singles to the wally, trapping hands. Practice those three, and that's the art. Really. And so what do we do every class? Singles and wally, trapping hands. And
You have you have to go with the fundamentals. You have to master the
yeah,
fundamentals, regardless of whatever it is. If it's throwing, kicking, shooting, etc., it's the fundamentals that matter. So going back to your bell curve graph there, like the ugly beginning stuff. Again, if good technique, this is my definition of good technique. Good technique is the result of efficient body mechanics. Because if you are efficient with your unique body mechanics, make it work for you, and you also are adapting to the basic principles of how to make that work, like a nice solid punch is you're pushing off your back foot, rotational power, extension, etc., good balance. That is mechanical efficiency. That is universal, but adapting that to the individual is niche and nuanced, but it's really ugly at the beginning. And where it becomes effective is when you're efficient with that movement and those biomechanical capabilities. Therefore,
yeah.
good technique. Speed is not just about being fast. Speed is a result of efficiency. Thus, good technique.
Economy of motion, efficiency of action.
Exactly. But it doesn't look like that in the beginning, because how can it?
How can it? Yeah, you don't have the rep. You don't have the reps.
Yeah.
Slow, slow is smooth, smooth is fast. Economy of motions, efficiency of action, control the
Yeah.
battle space. Uh, these are all the things that Bruce emphasizes in, whatever our flavor of modern Arnis,
Mhm.
and principles that he took from Remy
Mhm.
and applied. And so that's what we focus on.
Yeah.
That's what we focus on. Everything else is just methods. These
Mhm.
are our principles, and everything else is just methods.
Yeah, yeah. I let, and again, going back to what's the goal in mind? If my goal is to hit you in the face with my fist, how do I get there? And the way I get there is based upon this path and rule set of what's laid before me. But my math in this might be a little unique because it's unique to me. So,
Yeah.
and this is the part where again, back to FMAers, when they get so rigid into like, this is the traditional curriculum for whatever purpose, because this is the specific look of that methodology now, because the curriculum is very strict, but curriculum doesn't necessarily equate to the rest of the application into fighting. Curriculum
Right.
helps establish capability leading into fighting, but curriculum does not directly correlate as to you must do this to be a good fighter, or this is the only way to fight. So,
Right. That's exactly right.
which is odd, because from the case of an FMA standpoint is if FMA is the duct tape of the martial arts world, one shouldn't be so stuck and rigid in the aspect of you must do it this way to make it work. It's an odd paradox.
Right. No, that's very true. That's very true.
Yeah. I don't know how much this has actually been a wide variety of stuff. I don't know how much time we had set aside for this, but we've been going on this for
I don't either.
hours.
Yeah. Well, let's we can wrap it up, and I'm always open to talk, bro. So whatever you want. But I do, if I can, I'd like to mention the event coming up this month.
Yeah, let me pull up your Facebook page while you are talking about it. One sec.
Yeah. AKST should have it up 19th through the 21st. Did you find it?
Yep.
Excellent. Oh yeah, we're doing some. There's nope, that's just where I teach. Let me see if I don't know if is there an events link?
There, I'll find it. But anyways, for everybody, this is your Facebook page. Go there.
Yes.
Find it.
Yeah. Caught me in doing a really nice abanico there. But anyway. Yeah, so 19th through the 21st, we're going to be at Sewanee Gables Motel, right on the Sewanee River, and doing a seminar hosted by Grandmaster Dieter Knutel of the German Modern Arnis Federation. I introduced you guys.
Yeah.
That my website's being completely redone right now. I'm in the process. Yeah, so it's going to be Datu Knutel and Grandmaster Bruce Chu. And we're going to be doing classes Friday through Sunday. The price is $350 for the whole weekend. That's all inclusive. It includes your seminar fee, your room, and the food.
Nice.
So yeah, we've got a friend of mine. He's gonna come out and smoke a bunch of meat, and we're gonna just in true FMA fashion.
That's the most important part. That's the most important part.
We're gonna eat, baby. We're gonna eat, baby. So, very excited about that. And then in August, the DAV, the German Modern Arnis Federation, they are having their, I think it's every other year. I think they do their camp every other year. So I'll be attending, participating in that, and Bruce Chu will be a guest instructor in that. So those are the two big events coming up.
Well, I will throw them up on the Facebook page when I find it. And
yes.
Yeah, sorry I didn't find it in there while we're chatting about it, but
it's all good. I can send it to you.
Yeah, that'd be great. But yeah, for everybody, here is your Facebook page again. Oh yeah, while we're at it, look at that section.
Look at that. That is beautiful.
Look at that. I knew a guy.
Yeah. The mighty brown man in his highest form right there. Yep. I really appreciate that, man. I love the look. I think it's awesome.
Oh, thank you for giving me the opportunity and trusting me with your logo, because branding is is uniquely important for everybody. So
1,000%. 1,000%. I love the way it turned out. It looked great. And also the podcast thing, placeholder that you put together, and then the modifications you did for my website when that's coming up. So
yeah, you're welcome. Happy to do it anytime. Also for people, here is your Instagram. People go to the Instagram, follow that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I do need to post some more, honestly. I really do.
It takes so much work. It's
a lot of work.
It is so much effort to put shit out there consistently. And this is actually, as we're closing out, this is the part that's hard about being a person on the internet, is being a slave to, I
Your
mean, you can
content
be
schedule.
your content schedule. I mean, you can choose to be a slave, which is odd. I mean, I get if you have to do it for making money, but yeah, being a slave to your content schedule, oh man, that takes work and effort. And I get it if people need to do it for marketing. I mean, I do a fair amount of it myself, but there's also days where it's like, fuck it, I'm not doing this for a week because I don't have to. I get to, I like to, but like I don't have to do it all the time. So
Well, you always run that danger when you do something that you love, and then just everybody thinks, that it's that old saying, like if you do something you love, you never work a day in your life.
that's yeah,
That's absolute bullshit, man.
yes, it is.
I'm gonna throw that out there because you can grow to resent it, where it's not fun for you anymore. It doesn't light you up anymore,
Yep.
and I've very much tried to avoid that in with Modern Arnis because I do love teaching it,
Mhm.
but I really don't want to make a living from it.
Yeah, that's what
No.
ruined martial arts for me this second time around. And it took me several years to come back to it. Is I got so burnt out, and I've talked about this a lot, and I'll continue to talk about it. Is like I got so physically and emotionally, spiritually, all the things burnt out by giving so much of my time, my emotionality, my spirit, with all these things to other people, and not
Mhm.
recharging my own battery. And yeah, that took everything out of me. And like I said, it's taken me 5 years to come back to it. But something that I loved, something I have attached to my identity, those that of which we love destroys me. I mean, it's true.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. That's a way more accurate phrase. They should talk about that part.
They should. They should. But
We
again,
will.
that's
We will.
yeah, that's the non-sexy soft skills that people don't want to do because they see the cool guy stuff on Instagram and want to watch people punch and kick each other and stab shit, but they don't want to sit here and talk about philosophy. And, oh well, some people at least.
Yeah. Well, yeah. It's ego and money
Yeah,
is
yeah.
what it is.
Yeah, well. Anyways, yeah, you put out I'll find the flyer. You have anything else you want to put out before we close out here with everybody?
No, I know that you're working on some things with some introductions that we were able to make. So
Yeah,
I'm very excited to see those. Um, and also just I guess some ups for you, man. Like I appreciate what you do. I love watching the podcasts, and yeah, I really enjoyed you talking to Jim Webster, who is also
yeah.
trained with Bruce Chu.
Jim is awesome. I love chatting with him.
Yeah, he's gonna be down here, I think, next month. So I've
Mhm.
never met him. We've talked many times through Instagrams,
Mhm.
and I think we're gonna try and have lunch or dinner one day with
Nice.
Bruce. So yeah, man, I really appreciate what you bring to the table and to the community. We just don't. It's nice to just see some conversations around not just FMA and what we do, but I like the sidebars and the other things that you end up talking about because it is all martial arts should be in everything that you do.
Exactly. It's a
You know?
lifestyle. So why not talk about the lives that are involved in it? So human stories. I want to talk to the people about them being them.
Right.
As a martial artist, I already know martial arts conversations, but people conversations, that's what I'm after. So I'm just grateful that everybody gives me the opportunity and the trust with their stories and their time and the gift of it. Yeah, I'm just happy to share it out. And honestly, this is a way for me to give my gratitude to the community for putting up with my shenanigans. And also, it's a great opportunity for me to get to know people because I'm isolated way the fuck up here in the frozen, not so frozen north. So, anyways.
Well, I'm glad that you do the rubber chicken thing. I thought I invented the rubber chicken.
Ah,
I'd never seen it before. And I picked up this rubber chicken. I'm like, I'm buying this and I'm going to make
yeah,
videos with it because it just demonstrates the principle that anything can
yeah,
be a weapon. These are
yeah,
universal principles, right?
yep.
And then Chris sent me a video. I think he sent you my video, and he sent me one of your videos, and I was like,
Yeah.
wow, I did not invent this. This Kurt guy he's absolutely brilliant, and
Oh,
clearly more brilliant than I, because he thought of it first.
I didn't think of it. Well, I appreciate that, but I've always had a rubber chicken in my life or a toilet plunger. So this goes back to like the humor side. My dad gave me my two favorite Muppets characters. This is a completely bird trail, but my two favorite Muppets characters are Gonzo the Great
Yep.
and Fozzie Bear.
Mm-hmm.
What's unique to them? Rubber chickens. So
Mm-hmm.
as 10 years old, given rubber chickens, I've had rubber chickens as part of my shenanigans the entirety of my life. So like it's been every part of like me terrorizing my friends and family, to include the school. And it's also like it was a big part of my training tools in my own school when I was teaching, because it's fun and it helps break down a lot of like the icky, scary barriers. And also it's a cheaper version of using an AccuStrike knife, because for $50, I can get 100 rubber chickens. An AccuStrike knife, that's a couple $100. So, like, why not?
Well, not only that, but you got to buy batteries for it.
Exactly. So,
Yeah.
it's economic and it's funny, and I like it.
Yeah, I love it, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's great. I love your approach. It's unique. Yeah, I love and appreciate you, man. So keep doing it.
You too, sir. I'll chat with you later. I'm going to drop you down. I'm going to do the outro. Just hang out in the lobby real quick.
Yeah, man. Have a good one.
You too. I'll see you in a little bit.
All right, bro.
All right, homie. Okay, people. Episode 51 in the can. It'll be out here in a couple of weeks. Yeah, great conversation. I love chatting with Cam. Actually, and for the sidebar, like this is actually where I get to make a lot of friends, because being one of the few FMAers up here, I don't have a lot of friends within this community because there's not a very large community. So this gives me an opportunity to build community and friendship. So if you want to be my homie, I'm more than happy to be your homie. But come on, and I would love to sit down and chat with you and talk about all the wide variety of shenanigans we could get into. But again, thanks for supporting the podcast. I got another podcast coming up next week. I'll put flyers out and all that. But in the meantime, everybody have a wonderful Thursday afternoon doing whatever they're doing. And yeah, I'll see you later.